This is how you build up endurance. So we loaded the body. The next day is a clean out session. And the third day is easy. 20 minutes at U, 20 minutes super light at reg, and 20 minutes at M. These are very, very low intensities, but we modulate them. Ladies and gents, hello and a very warm welcome. My name's Aram, I'm a rowing coach. Welcome to the Competitive Rowing channel. Now this is a reaction video to one of Joe Rogan's clips. I like what Joe Rogan does. I think he's a great guy. And this was a very interesting podcast. The guy is interviewing, his name is Firas Zahabi, I hope I pronounced his name correctly. And he's essentially talking about training, and his key message, if my takeaway is correct, is that don't overload every single training. At the beginning he says, never overload, but that's not how it works. And if you listen closely, he's actually saying, don't overload every single training, because you get out much more training volume if you don't overload. Let's listen in to the start sequence. Super interesting.
Let's explain it to people.
Yeah. Okay. So let me. Okay. So let's say, for instance, I'm a big believer in never being sore. You should train. The next day you should wake up feeling good.
Okay, that's the first thing where I would like to say something. That is utopias. The basic principle of supercompensation works in a way where you say, okay, the body is subjected to a state that is possibly life-threatening. Sounds harsh, but essentially this is how it works. And your body never wants to be in the same bad situation again, so it overcompensates. The body increases its capacity. It could be endurance, strength, a combo of that, technical skills, whatever you throw it at, it will improve. That's just how we're wired. We're wired to adapt to the current circumstances, and if these circumstances are too harsh for what we're capable of handling right now, the body will adapt, provided you don't kill it. I'm also not a big believer in the Navy SEALs saying Navy SEALs is so popular today. It looks like it's the only special forces unit on the planet where they say the only easy day was yesterday. That's a bunch of nonsense, and it only works if you have a row of enlisted women and men you can select from, and you're not responsible in any way how fit they are when they are 40, 50, 60 years old. Essentially, it sounds harsh, but it's throwaway material. And we as coaches, we don't think of athletes as throwaway material. My job is to get people fit. I coach people 70, 75 years old, but I also coach 14-year-old, 15-year-old people and everything between, wanting to go to the Olympics. There is no such thing. You're responsible not just for the result these people are achieving, but also how fit they are 5-10 years down the line. Let's keep on listening.
It's not possible.
Well, because look, if okay, that's a great example. Let's say your energy levels.
We're talking about fit people, by the way, right?
Every human being.
So guys never worked out before?
Even first day, never trained.
How is it possible to work out and not be sore?
No problem. Beautiful.
Okay, here we go.
So let's say there's something called rate of perceived exertion.
Okay, sorry to interrupt that time. So most people go by heart rate or go by speed or watts. I'm talking about a rowing perspective here. And if you're not a rower, but if you hop on one of these linear arcs in your gym, you probably see either calories, ditch that, it's not relevant. I recommend you go by watts or 500 meter split. That's what pays the most. And this gives you, it's not a very accurate level or accurate value. So don't expect a consistent readout from machine to machine, but it's better than calories. And you can go by watts, you can go by 500 meters, but essentially that's the output you're creating. Although not reliable values, it's okay. Then you have heart rate, and then you have perceived exertion. And that's, for me personally, and the more reliable parameter. It takes a while. The way this works is as follows. For my athletes, I'm using a scale of 1 to 6. You can use a scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 100, whatever you like. In my case, 1 is easy as pie, it's a walk in the park. 6 is so hard you don't know how to take the next rowing stroke, okay? And I use 0.5 increments, so something can feel like a 1 or a 2.5 or a 3.5 or a 4. And it takes a couple of weeks before you have subjected yourself to multiple intensities, and then you get a good feeling, okay, this felt like a 1.5, and I don't know, 200 watts yesterday felt like a 3, today they feel like a 3.5. It's the same 200 watts, but you're possibly in a different state. And that is a pretty reliable parameter. So that means you're not as fit for whatever reason. Could be stress, lack of sleep, hard training before, a development in your body when you're teeny, that is going on at the moment, which is occupying a lot of your performance capacity. Now, if you went by heart rate, your heart rate might possibly be low. Why? Because sometimes when you're tired, our heart rate doesn't go up that much anymore. There are tricky nuances you need to understand as a coach and as an athlete. Let's just keep on listening here.
So let's say I make you do pull-ups, and let's say the maximum amount of pull-ups you can do, the maximum amount of pull-ups is 10. Let's keep a nice round number. At 11, you couldn't do 11. If I pointed a gun at you, you couldn't do 11. Should I make you do 10 pull-ups on our workout? No. I'm going to make you do 5. Why? Because I'm setting you up to work the next day. The next day we're going to...
That's a very important point here. Okay. Now, pull-ups are probably not a good example, but I understand why I brought it up, because this is what most people understand. In rowing training, and rowing is one of the few exercises that actually make you comprehensively fit. Everybody wants to be fit like a rower. The thing is, if you go hard every day, and I know a lot of colleges are doing this, which is pure nonsense, the problem is that you are essentially wasting potential for the next training session. That's one point. But that's not the most important point. The most important point is that we need to develop certain things which can only be developed at certain percentages of your maximum effort. So let's say in rowing, for example, if you look at a 1,000 meter race or a 2,000 meter race or a 5K long distance race, eventually, when you are at the start line, you probably run around after warm-up with roughly 1.5 to 2 millimole of lactate. And what most people are capable of reaching is something around 10 to 14 millimole of lactate. Some people can only reach 6 to 7, some people can reach 20. But 20 is a rare thing. Lactate is something the body produces on a consistent basis. So when your muscle contraction is going on, I keep it very simple. Lactate is a byproduct that is then reused to generate more energy for the muscle. So lactate is something normal that's flowing around our system all the time. And if we take a drop of blood from your ear, we can measure that. And the lactate concentration tells us roughly where you are in terms of your performance capacity. I just did a lactate test this morning. So what we wanted to find out is how many watts do my athletes pull at, let's say, 1 millimole, 2 millimole, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 millimole. Now there's that ominous 4 millimole lactate barrier, which we call the anaerobic threshold. Essentially, what happens in the body is something changes. So when we eat something, the food that we eat is ultimately turned into glucose. And glucose is then turned into ATP, adenosine triphosphate. ATP is the only source the muscle can use. What happens then is, the question is how and where is glucose drawn from? So you can have it from fat, you can have it from carbs, or you can have it from proteins. That's the three prime sources. The thing is, if you draw it mostly from carbs, you will very likely reach anaerobic state very quickly. What's the big deal, you may say? Well, usually 1 mole of glucose, mole is just a unit, 1 mole of glucose yields 34 mole of ATP. That's just a number. The interesting number comes now. The moment we pass that anaerobic threshold, which is roughly 4 millimole, realistically it's between 3 and 7, and it's from person to person different, and within a person it can change. So there are tricks that we coaches use to make sure you're in the right zone. Anyway, the moment you pass that anaerobic threshold steady state, what happens is that 1 mole of glucose doesn't yield 34 mole of ATP anymore, but 2. So the energy yield that we get per mole of glucose becomes significantly less, which means that you are far less efficient in the way you produce energy. And this is what's not being mentioned in this interview. Probably there was not enough time. I'm sure they know all about this, but you guys don't. So this is why I'm bringing this up. So wouldn't you say, well, shouldn't I not be in that aerobic threshold steady state, which means below that gray zone or border zone where I slowly cross into anaerobic threshold steady state? No, realistically not. At the beginning of a race, you may be below that. At the end of the race, you will be above that. And that has something to do with the race distance. A race distance, let's say a 1K lasts between 3 and 5 minutes, depending on how fit you are and which boat class you're rowing, or on the erg. A 2K will last probably twice as long, maybe a little less. And a 5K will be around 15 to 20 some minutes. Okay, that is still not a long endurance workout or a race. It's not cycling where we do 2 hours. So yes, you will build a lot of lactate, but the point, and that's the most important thing, we rowing coaches need to convey and coach your bodies to be able to do. We need to make sure that you can stay aerobic for as long as possible. We know eventually within the race you will become anaerobic. There's nothing we can do about this. But what we can do is make sure that you are able to pull a lot of watts before you go anaerobic. And then we need to make sure that you can deal with high amounts of lactate in your body that will not be reused because you're in anaerobic threshold steady state. This is when lactate piles up. And later on it's deteriorated and reused again. But that's a long recovery process. Now, the big deal with super high intensity is if you go all out every single session, and like he's saying here, if you can do 10 pull-ups, should I make you do 10 pull-ups? Well, sometimes you need to make that person do 10 pull-ups, or try for 11 or even 12. Why? Because we need to train lactate tolerance. We need to increase our V2 max. There's so many things that we need to train as rowers because we need to be able to perform in high intensity zones as well. However, the way you build up your anaerobic threshold steady state, which means you pull a lot of watts or you're going very fast without crossing into that anaerobic threshold zone too early, means that you need to practice below anaerobic threshold quite a bit. I would say 70% of all the workouts you do should be sub-anaerobic threshold steady state. That is very important. Now, most of you, if you're not a rower, if you just came across this channel and you have no idea about how to actually target the right training zones, a very simple thing, not every training should be all out. So, should I stay sub-anaerobic threshold all the time? No. There are phases where I make my athletes do crazy things, like going 4 times 3 minutes all out. And all out means after 30 seconds, you have no clue how to take the next stroke. I'm not talking about you passing out, that's dangerous. I'm talking about you becoming slower, your technique becoming worse. Breathing is a challenge, not unhealthy, but in a healthy way. And it's just agony, and you feel like the worst loser in the world, and your mind plays weird games with you. And that's important. Most people never dare to do that because they're always, I have to go all out. If you go all out every time, you're lost. Because in fact, what happens is you never go all out, but you also never do your homework sub-anaerobic threshold. And that's a big, big problem. So I think what Joe Rogan and Firas Zahabi are talking about here is something very, very important. And I see this especially with you guys in the US. No, it's actually true. It's actually true in many places of the world. The problem is, see, a lot of you, women and men, are used to, okay, it was a good training session if I'm completely wasted afterwards. Even Patrick Bet-David said this in one of his videos and said he's got a new coach and he fired him so hard, it was such a hard workout, it was so good. No, it wasn't. There are times where you do not want to go all out for most of the time. But there are times where you want to go all out. One plays hand in hand with the other. Okay? So with this being said, let's listen.
5. And the next day we're going to do another 5. And then we're going to do 6. When 6 is really easy, we're going to do 7. Why? If you count...
Okay, let's go back and listen to this again.
Should I make you do 10 pull-ups on our workout? No. I'm going to make you do 5. Why? Because I'm setting you up to work the next day. The next day we're going to do 5. And the next day we're going to do another 5. And then we're going to do 6. When 6 is really easy, we're going to do 7. Okay,
the point is here really easy. There are nuances, and that is what every athlete needs to understand. This is what I'm making my athletes understand. My personal training plan philosophy is that I use 11 different training zones. You may think this is crazy. Nobody can follow that. Yes, you can. That's the point. Variation is the key. And you know what? Of these 11 different training zones, Reg, which is super easy, UMO 345 is sub-anaerobic threshold or at anaerobic threshold. And this is where we spend the majority of time. 6, 7 millimole of lactate, these are the two beginning high intensity threshold zones, and then race pace and above race pace. These are the zones that we have above, but that's a tiny percentage of everything we do. And it's only possible to do this because we've done homework before. Okay? So what he's saying that is that once 6 feels super easy, then I do 6. Yes, sometimes that pays. But sometimes you don't need to do 6 pull-ups. Maybe you should be doing 8, and the next day you're going back to 5. It doesn't work with pull-ups, metaphorically speaking. From an endurance standpoint of view, this is how it works. So let's say you can do 150 watts, and that's super easy. On a perceived exertion scale of 1 to 6, it feels like a 2. Then you will probably do perceived exertion endurance sessions that feel like a 1.5 on one day, that feel like a 2 on one day. And on the next day, you're going to mix it up. You're going to do some at 1.5, some at 2, some at 4, and you go back to 1.5 within a unit. Because this is going to trigger your body to build up anaerobic threshold steady state. And that is the most important thing to do. The reason why I know this is because I've done, I don't know how many thousand lactate tests. That is the most important thing to understand, how to increase your body's capacity to work in the efficient mode, even though your body is performing at a very high level. I will leave it here. I'm not going to cover the entire video. I will link the original clip here. What I do not want to do is play some Joe Rogan clip and profit from that and say, I critique Joe Rogan. I don't critique them. I think it was a very interesting episode. I recommend you hop over and watch the full episode. I'm going to link it. I'm going to close this video off with a training plan snippet of how I plan my sessions. This is an examinatory week where we are, let's say, in the middle of a year. A year is a macro cycle of training. And I do this with my masters athletes, with novice athletes, with people who just started with rowing training. So this is a plan that has 5 units a week, and that is always adapted to your personal situation. But that's just an exemplary plan. You've already done a lot of base endurance at the beginning of the season, which usually starts at the beginning of winter. Now we are in the part of the season where we slowly increase the intensities. We have to get you ready to perform in 3 months' time. This is usually when most of the races start. Unit 1 is a race warm-up. A race warm-up is essentially a 20-minute, 15 to 20-minute routine where we do various low intensities and a few medium to a bit high intensities, but not full. That's very important. And then we would do 10 times 90 seconds at a stroke rate that's a bit coded of roughly 26. 26 is definitely below race pace stroke rate, but it's definitely above your typical low steady state stroke rate. In rowing, a typical low steady state stroke rate should be around 14, 15, 16. 16 is more realistic, to maybe 18, 19 if you pull higher watts. So don't rumble around with a stroke rate 22 going low intensity. Why? Because then you miss out on the strength component that rowing has, that rowing requires. Okay, so stroke rate 26 is right in the middle, but we're trying to go full force. Well, we don't do this on a regular basis. At that stage of the season, we're doing this as a specific strength training. It's rowing motion specific strength. Okay, and in between these 90-second intervals, we take a 3-minute light paddle. And then we do a 10-minute light paddle cool down, which can be done on a bike. So this is a strength-loaded, specific, rowing-specific intensity session. It is not all out. It is probably 80% of what you can do during these, so overall. While you're doing the 90 seconds, this is pretty much everything you can do, provided you have decent form and technique. But it's not all out to absolute max, gonna kill you, okay? The next day, we have, these are intensity zones. U and M, that's a light paddle and a bit more than a light paddle, but still super low stuff. Stroke rate around 16 to 17, 17 to 18 stroke. these are all paces you could go at for easily an hour or longer without being wasted at all, okay? Then we do 10 minutes at intensity 4. 4 is roughly a stroke with 23, 24, not full force, regular force. So this is maybe 70% of your maximum effort. Maybe 65, maybe 70, maybe 75. But it is not hard. It is not easy. It's just in between. Why do we do this? Because you still have a lot of lactate from the day before in your system. And it's very likely that with the 10 minutes of reg cool down, we were not able to get rid of that. But we have to get it out of your system. Otherwise, you will be prone to injuries. And your heart seriously doesn't like too much lactate floating around in your system. So the next day is essentially an easy session where you have 2 10-minute blocks at 4, if you saw this, roughly a 24, 23 stroke rate, where we have a slight bit of a trigger in order to help the body clean out the lactate. In between these two, we have 10 minutes of a light paddle, and at the end, 10 minutes light paddle as well. That's just endurance, okay? This is how you build up endurance. So we loaded the body. The next day is a clean out session, and the third day is easy. 20 minutes at U, 20 minutes super light at reg, and 20 minutes at M. These are very, very low intensities, but we modulate them because this is how you adapt much quicker and it's not so monotonous. And then a good set of stretching. Generally, we recommend to do stretching every session, but this is a session where I explicitly wrote it down. So this is where you clean out to recover faster, a recovery session. Now you are ready. Now you are ready for a second intensity session of the week. And the second intensity session of the week happens to be just like the first one. As unit 5, we have another clean out session. If you had a unit 6 on this plane, it probably would be another very light session. But there's no unit 6, only unit 5 is a clean out. In this case, then there are 2 days off. And the following week, we might be doing something similar, or it would be an entire week with lesser intensities, where we try to build the base once again in the low intensity zones. That's how you modulate. Okay, if you want to work with me, my website is aramtraining.com. My email address is info@aramtraining.com, and I'm very happy to work with you. Now, final word, if you want to save your back and enjoy your rowing more, hop over to the BioRower website, www.biorower.com. That's the rowing machine that I've been building now for 23 years. And the project started because my back was done from the linear erg. And this helped me to start to row again. Now, with this being said, thank you very much for your subscription. This is very important. If this is interesting for you and would like to have more videos like these coming, let me know. Put it in the comments. Contact me on rowing.zone. That's the rowing enthusiast platform where everybody who just likes rowing meets. I don't care if you just started to row on an indoor rower and you've never seen a boat and no intention of touching a boat. Or you're a seasoned Olympian, former Olympian, or professional rowing coach. Everybody should meet. Rowing includes everybody. The rowing.zone platform is designed to be a place where everybody can meet. It's small, it's slowly growing. It has a free classified ads page. So if you have something to sell or you're looking for something to buy on the rowing market, this is where you can buy and sell things, and it's free of charge. So I'm doing this with the hope to build a good rowing community place that also provides free service to the community. Okay, that's it. Share this video with somebody. If you know somebody who's actually struggling with training planning, share this video or also share my contact. I'm very happy to help. With this being said, thank you so much for your time. I hope it was worth your time. Let me know what you think. What is your idea of this entire thing? Please put it in the comments below. Until then, I see you in the next video and have a very good day. Bye-bye.